Thinking about getting yourself a VR headset for Microsoft Flight Simulator, but you're not sure about the performance? Then you're in the right place. So despite being a huge VR enthusiast, I've been playing Microsoft Flight Simulator on a flat screen monitor, and that has been down to the performance. There's been lots of in-game stuttering to the extent that despite having very robust VR legs, it actually made me feel nauseous as I turned my head. You got black bars at the side, and I've been very keen to play this game consistently within VR. That is exclusively the way that I play Elite Dangerous. It's a very, very immersive experience. And lots of these performance challenges have been due to the lack of real multi-threaded support within the world and game engine. Well, through recent updates, Microsoft have improved the multi-threaded performance, so we're going to delve back into VR in Microsoft Flight Simulator and see if it's got any better. For this testing, we are using an RTX 2080 Ti with a Ryzen Threadripper 3960X. That's all on an Asus Zenith 2 Extreme with 64 gigs of Corsair RAM. We've set the index at its default resolution, so there's no Steam super sampling, and within Microsoft Flight Simulator we've set the world render at 80%. All of the other settings are on the screen in front of you now. That's nice and smooth at the moment. There's no glitching on the sides. Looks great in the index there. Subjectively, that feels a lot better. The dials are still tricky to read. You still have to lean right in to be able to read the dials, but nothing that you couldn't get used to. Yeah, that's good. Very immersive. That's a substantial improvement than the last time I tried it. I've actually been playing on a flat screen monitor, and just because the VR performance just wasn't there, it wasn't a nice experience. It was making me feel nauseous. But this, I've got the Reverb G2, and the Windows Mixed Reality is just not quite as good at doing the compensation for the low frame rate. So where it does like a motion reprojection, it can't hit that 90 frames per second. Steam VR is pretty good at locking that down at 45 and then filling in the missing frames. Windows Mixed Reality is just not quite as good at doing that. So we've gone back onto the index, which of course is a lower resolution. There's less work required. Let's get our first notch of flaps in. Just compensate for the nose pitching up. And we see our speed starting to come down. A little bit of trim there on just to keep the nose down. We can see the airport there just off to the side. At that, yeah, as I look around, there's no black bars on the side. This is a completely subjective test. There's no black bars on the side. That is nice and smooth. That's very doable, actually, now. Decisions. Do you go the Simionic route? And a little bit of glitching as I turn my head quickly then. Do you go the Simionic route? Try and get some sort of wraparound monitor, or do you go VR? I mean, as you all know, I've got quite the penchant for VR. Right, we're about 45 degrees. Just give it a little bit more. And then we'll come round and we'll start getting ourselves set up for a landing. Now that is a very, 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 very nice experience. I'm impressed with that. Just want to maintain altitude here. This is Coventry Airport, near where I live. Been doing actual flying lessons out of there, so, and I have to say the real world view of all of this is pretty bang on, actually. It's all the markers and everything are where you would expect them to be, so it's a nice way of combining real world training with that water marker is exactly where you would expect it to be. That's great. Right, let's get our final notch of flaps in. We should have done that already, actually. I'm getting distracted, wittering away as I do. There's the runway. Now, one thing I would say, you would be able to see the PAPI lights on a monitor from here, which I can't. I can't quite make them out. I know I'm low, but I only know that from experience. Right, let's get full RPM. Let's get our landing gear down. Just a little bit more power just to maintain that 100 knots. That is a nice smooth experience. We've got no problems here at all. There's no wind, so we don't need to worry about crosswind landings. I can just about make the PAPI out now. I'm not sure if that's 1 white or 2 white. Either way, we want to be coming down, which we are. Still at 100 knots. We want to be 90 knots as we cross the threshold of the runway, but we're on a nice descent. Yeah, that's so now I can make out all 4 of the PAPI. It's 2 white, 2 red, 3 white, 1 red, so we're a little bit high. Just bring the power off a little bit, get ourselves coming down, and we just want to start bringing the throttle back, keeping the nose up just while we bleed off some of that speed. We want to be 90 knots as we cross the threshold of the runway. You just see that speed coming off now. 98 knots. We're on the glide slope. 95 knots. Keep the throttle coming back. Keep the throttle coming back. 94 knots. Keep the throttle coming back a little bit low. Just pitch the nose up a little bit. There we go. That's 90 knots. We want to maintain that now all the way down. And a little bit slow, a little bit more power, and just bring the power back, keep the nose up, keep the nose up, keep the nose up, keep pulling back. Nice, keep the nose up, just adjust with the rudder wheels, keep that nose up, keep the nose up, and just let the nose drop, get the flaps up. There we go. A little bit of brakes. Nice soft landing, but that's nice smooth experience. Substantially better than what I was experiencing 8, 9, 10 months ago. Right, here we are again, slightly more objective measure. We've got a FPS counter that's showing us CPU, GPU utilization. It's showing us the reprojection ratio, the super sampling that's going on, the frame timings, etc. So again, we will do a quick circuit. You can already see that we're dropping below the 45 that we want to try and maintain. Let's concentrate and get the aircraft in the air. Get ourselves on that runway heading. Get our first turn in. I mean, it feels smooth. I can see that the frame rate's bouncing between 40 and 45 frames per second. I mean, it does feel smooth though, and I think this is the thing for simulators, is you don't need 90 frames a second to have a good experience in a simulator. Again, I'm well above pattern altitude. Pattern altitude at Coventry is 1000 AGL. So we want to be about 1200 to account for the runway altitude. Get ourselves turned round. Just start losing a little bit of that height. But yeah, we're getting, just to bounce down as low as 30 there, but I gotta be honest, it's not discernibly noticeable in the simulator. I would say that the experience is still smooth. There's no black bars at the side. I'm having a jolly good time in what is a very, very, very complex simulator. You can see GPUs at 60, 80%. CPU, I suspect there's some bottlenecking going on there. I'd largely ignore the 15%. I've got a 24 core system here, and there's no way that it's utilizing all of those cores. Right, we're about the altitude we want to be. Let's get our first notch of flaps on. We're slightly off the heading that we want to be. Compensate for the nose drift up. But yeah, I mean, it feels smooth. It's perfectly playable. I can read the dials just about. Certainly in the primary flight display, I can read those gauges perfectly fine. I'm struggling with the MFD, in particular with my manifold pressure and the RPM for the propellers, but I can have a good guesstimate. I mean, I know roughly where they should be. You can judge it, I suppose, to an extent by the noise that the engine is making. Let's just get a little bit of trim in there. The nose keeps wandering up, and gonna want to start our final turn. Yeah, FPS still bouncing around between 30 and 45, but Steam VR is doing a grand job at compensating for that. I'm not hugely noticing that here in the simulator, so this is going to be an objective versus subjective, and of course it's the experience that matters. The stats are helpful, they're a helpful guide to understand what's going on. We're a little bit low, so just going to put in a bit more power. Let's get that final notch of flaps in. We've got our water marker here, just a bit more power, speeds at 100 knots, which is where we want to be, still a smidge on the low side, a bit more power because we're still losing altitude. Right, let's get ourselves turned in, let's get the landing gear down, let's get high RPM on those rotors. Got in a little bit late with our turn. Oh, there's the moon. We've overshot slightly, nothing we can't deal with. We are still low, still bouncing around between 30 and 45 frames per second, and of course I've got OBS running, I've got a frame counter running. All of those things are using up resources. And we've got 3 green, the gear is down. We're a little bit low, as we know. Right, there we go. Let's get off on that. Let's start bringing us down. Start throttling back. Get ourselves on the glide slope. Again, perfectly good experience, dropping to 30 frames per second there. Excuse my dog in the background who's battling some sort of lorry.
500.
Okay, we're a little bit high, so let's get off the power. A little bit high and a little bit fast, so see what we can do about that. Let's get the nose up. We don't want to drop too fast. go, back on the glide slope, but get that nose up. 95 knots, we want to be 90 knots. You keep coming back on the power. 94 knots, we're on the glide slope. 92 knots. 91 knots. 90 knots, perfect. Yeah. So despite a little bit of overshooting, coming off the power, getting that nose up. Coming off the power, there we go. Powers, get that nose up. A little bit of ballooning there. Keep that nose up, keep that nose up, keep pulling back. Nice. Get the gear up. And now we're down on the ground, we're getting slightly more consistent 45 frames per second, but that was not a bad experience at all. So our subjective experience came off pretty well, actually. There was no visible stuttering to be seen, no nausea at all. All of the black bars as I turned my head had been eliminated, and I could read the vast majority of the dials in the cockpit. It felt smooth, it was very immersive, and it was very enjoyable actually setting yourself up for landings. It just doesn't feel quite the same on a flat screen monitor. Our objective performance review didn't fare quite so well. We didn't manage to sustainably maintain that sweet spot at 45 frames per second. It was dipping down to 30 frames per second, but at the risk of being not very objective at all, I didn't personally notice that as I was in the simulator. So it is, in my opinion, the experience that matters. There's clearly more optimization for Microsoft to do to try and sustain higher frames per second within VR, but we are a generation behind with the 2080 Ti. We've not upgraded to the 3000 series, largely because of the obscene costs, but that's a different conversation. I think if you are sat there on a 2000 series, a 2070, 2080, 2080 Ti, or better, and you're considering either the Quest 2 or the Valve Index, I think you're going to have a good experience. Now, I do have the Reverb G2. The system really wasn't up to giving me a smooth, good experience in there, and I think that's partially down to the very high resolution within the Reverb G2, but it's also down to the motion compensation that exists within the Windows Mixed Reality software. I think the Steam VR motion reprojection has got pretty good, actually, and the Oculus motion compensation is frankly the best in the business. So if you're sat looking for a VR headset, my recommendations are go with the Quest 2 or the Valve Index. So there we go, guys. As always, I hope you're very well wherever in the world you are. Stay safe in the skies. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in my next one.